Hey, I just fixed the audio issue, so you guys.
Let's go.
At the buzzer.
Yeah, I just shot out a text right at the buzzer. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. That was on my end. I switched the speaker to what my microphone is and my microphone to what my speaker is. So
there we go. There we go.
Let's go. What up, Chris? Dude,
what's going on, guys? Thanks for having me.
Dude, no problem. We're very excited to have you. We appreciate you. I know you've been busy. The Tigers, they're in the middle of a game right now, and you're choosing to join the fellas. So appreciate that. I do. Before we start, you guys know who Chris is. Obviously, host of his own show, Chris and Company, which you can check out. Link will be in the description. And Chris, I need your thoughts. Listen, game on now. Yeah. Tigers, they lost the last 2 straight. What's been going on? They're 6-3. We were at opening day. It was a lot of fun. I need your, through 9 games, kind of reaction to what's been going on. Everything's been on your Twitter, but just kind of give me your positives, your negatives. What's been going on with you?
Well, first off, I love how you're acting like me being on this show is some sacrifice. We're losing 7-2 to the Pirates in the middle of April. This is probably a much better option at this point than having to endure, Reese Olson giving up line drive after line drive. No, look, honestly, and I'll talk about it in my video tonight. I think through 9, almost 10 games here, what I think this team is, they are not as good as how they played in the first 7 games of the season, and they are not as bad as how they've played over the last 3. It is somewhere in between. Ultimately, I think the story that will define this team throughout the season, because there's going to be variance. I don't see the bullpen being this dominant all season, though I do think they're going to be quite good. And I don't see the offense being this terrible, though I do think they're going to have their struggles. But ultimately, the story of this team will be they will not win games in which they don't pitch well. In every game that they've won this year, even if there's been a start or two where maybe Maeda or Mize didn't pitch great, the bullpen has always come in and bailed them out. What we saw in those last 2 games against Oakland, well, yeah, the offense completely fell apart. 1 run over 18 innings in those last 2 games. That's completely unacceptable. They gave up 4 and 6. They were down 5-0 early in that second game to Oakland. That'll ultimately be the story of this team. When the pitching holds strong, which I think I have faith it will do pretty consistently, because I think not only is there talent here, but I think there's depth here. They're going to win some games. But in games when that doesn't happen, this is not an offense that's built to play from behind unless we see a breakout season from one of these young players. And right now, we're not really seeing anything that indicates that that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chris, do you think as well, just kind of looking at this, even with the Guardians, they're like 8-2 right now as well, kind of to a hot start. Is this kind of just a division between the Guardians and Tigers right now? Do you think they can win it still, kind of from what you've seen to start?
I think the Twins will play better at some point here in the future. Cleveland was the team, when I did my 30 teams in 30 days ranking, Cleveland was one team I felt like I put way too low, because Cleveland consistently, you look at their roster and you're kind of unimpressed, but they always have pitching, and they always find a way to develop pitching. Now, Cleveland suffered a huge loss with Shane Bieber out for the season with elbow surgery. I mean, that's devastating for them. I would consider it a 3-team race. I know that there are some people who buy into the Royals, getting off to an above 500 start. I think their lineup got better. I think their starting pitching is okay, but they did nothing to fix what was a terrible bullpen a year ago. I think ultimately in the second half of the season, that's going to lose them a lot of games. The White Sox are unspeakably bad. So I think, look, it'll be a marathon. I think the Twins, the one advantage that the Twins have is they've been through this grind before. In the first half last season, they were roughly above 500 for a majority of it, played a lot better in the second half, ended up winning the division comfortably and making it to the ALDS. So I would not count them out, but I think just to start the season, it's hard not to be impressed with what Cleveland has done, especially with a first-year manager. They always have their system. They're going to put the ball in play. They're going to make you work. Might not hit for a ton of power outside of Jose Ramirez, but they're going to be a scrappy team. They consistently are. So I think they'll be in this race probably until the end.
All right, Chris. I appreciate you coming on the show. It was very nice meeting you. Very appreciative of it.
Of course,
but I'm not the biggest Tigers fan. I'm kind of dipping my toes in the water right now. Okay, so I'm trying to get exposed. Hey, I'm from Toledo. Been to a lot of Mud Hens games, but I'm trying to get more acclimated to it. And I obviously know like the Torques and the Riley Greens. But as a fan like me and people that are trying to get into the sport, specifically with this season, do you think there's some Tigers players that you think are going to kind of jump out and take a big step this year that maybe didn't previously?
Yeah, well, one player I think everyone should keep an eye on, and I'll just go with the offense, because I think it would be so easy for me to default to Skubal. Well, Skubal's like a Cy Young favorite. Like, that's an easy one to go to. From what I've seen thus far this season, I think one guy who's put together some really good at-bats and maybe hasn't gotten the results and has had some bad luck is Colt Keith. He was a rookie who was drafted, I think, in the 5th round of the COVID year draft, ascended through the system pretty quickly. They've They've really liked him. He started the year as this team's opening day second baseman as a rookie. Not an easy thing to do. Has hit for power at points, a little bit of extra base pop. I believe has a single in the game that we're watching tonight. I think that his ceiling outside of Torque and Green is probably as high as anyone on the team. I mean, he had a wonderful year across multiple leagues in the minor leagues a season ago, and has also rather surprisingly played some really good defense. I mean, I think in general, those are the guys that we get attached to. We love the free agent signings and we love the trades, but we love the guys that come up through the system, the Justin Verlanders of the world, these guys that we feel like we kind of knew from the very beginning. Colt Keith is one of those guys, and he's a young player. He's not somebody who's going to be kind of a stopgap 1 or 2 year option here. They signed him to a contract extension before he played a major league game. They're going to be paying him until he's about 30 years old to stay in Detroit and play ball games at Comerica Park. So I think that that's a guy who I could see being somebody who by the end of the year isn't hitting 5th or 6th, but is rather hitting really in the heart of that lineup in the 3 or 4 spot.
Hey, Chris, what's real quick, Jeff? I don't know. What's going on with Torque, man? Because like last year, can you break that down just for us a little bit? Last year he was unbelievable to end the year.
He fucking stinks. What's going on?
Let me just say real quick. Everybody thinks, and not you guys, everybody thinks I don't like Spencer Torkelson or I have some beef against him or something. Absolutely not. Here's the thing. When you get a player who's drafted 1-1, okay, you are going to hold said player to a higher standard than I'll hold some random schmuck who we called up from AAA. That's just the way things are. It's like
100%.
When you guys watch the Lions, you're going to judge Jared Goff much differently than the second string punter. That's just the way things are here. That one guy's getting paid the money. And so the issue I have with Torque is I think he has a higher ceiling than almost anybody on the team. I think that he is as inconsistent as any player we've seen here in a long time. This is we're 10 games in, so I'm not going to bury anybody. But the one thing I've said about him that's different than somebody like Riley Green is that Riley Green is an outfielder. There will always be a place for 10, 15 years, assuming health, on a major league roster for somebody like Riley Green. Even if he doesn't become a star, he'll be a serviceable left fielder. He's going to get on base. He can hit for power. There's a lot of things that he does. When we're talking about Spencer Torkelson, nobody drafted Spencer Torkelson for his defense. Nobody drafted Spencer Torkelson for his athleticism. Nobody drafted him under the belief that he was going to be Mike Trout and put up 10 wins above replacement per season. You drafted him for one reason, because this guy is going to hit the crap out of the baseball. And that means putting up an OPS that is 850 to 950 consistently year in and year out. Last year, he took a step forward. And for his second season, I viewed that as a success. But I'm going to hold him to a higher standard this year because first base is a position where you need power. You need guys who are getting on base. You need 35 plus home runs a year. You need an 800 plus OPS. If he's not doing that, then I'm not going to sit here and, kind of pat him on the back for taking steps forward following what was in a disastrous rookie season. So look, I want to like the guy, but the sample size is growing. I understood the criticism some people had towards my way of you've given up on him too early. I never gave up on him. I was just critical of him. But right now we're talking about a guy who is 2+ years into his major league career. And after being drafted 1-1, currently has a negative wins above replacement. Like, to put that into perspective, Javi Baez, who I rip, has given the Tigers more value analytically than what Spencer Torkelson has given them. And they arrived in Detroit at the same time. So part of my frustration is I have to throw my arms up and say, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's kind of up to him. I feel like the ability is there. Everyone raved about him when he was drafted out of ASU. Everyone raved about him coming up through the system. We could talk about hitting coaches or the consistency of the offense or player development all we want, but this is one of these things. He's going to have to find it on his own. And through 10 games, which is, again, very small sample size, it's been disappointing. I've reached a point now where for the longest time I said, he'll figure it out. I don't know anymore. I hope he does. I want him to. I think he has the mental makeup to, but I just can't decide what he wants to be. And it seems like he can't decide what he wants to be. So we're kind of just holding our breath at this point.
I think that's all fair points.
Yeah. I mean, and I think Chris put it well there. Chris, I want to ask you. I mean, AJ Hinch splash hired Chris Fetter, and he was in his own backyard as well. And I know Broder, who we're friends with as well, has some connections there with Chris Fetter at Michigan. What has he kind of meant to this ball club here? I mean, this is, if I'm not wrong, it's his first job in the MLB, correct?
Yeah. He came
from stud. Talk to me about it.
I liked him for just a backstory. He was the pitching coach at Michigan when they made it to the College World Series Finals in 2019. And I don't follow college baseball super closely, but I know that you need to absolutely know what you are doing front to back on a day-to-day basis to make it that far into Omaha at Michigan. I mean, that just doesn't happen. That was the farthest they'd made it since 1984. So when the Tigers brought him in, I think what it is he's He's brought in a new age philosophy in terms of analytics, video stuff, spin rates, all the fun stuff that pitchers are paying attention to nowadays. But having in the interactions that I've had with him and in the interactions that I've had with the guys who he's been coached by, I think much like AJ Hinch, he's a very good communicator, and he understands that there's not a one size fits all approach to how you develop players. I think that sometimes organizations fall into that issue where they think, well, it worked for this guy, therefore that same system has to work for another guy. That's not true. How you develop a Tarek Skubal is much different than how you might develop a Tyler Holton. And I think the understanding of that is what makes Fetter really special. And I also think part of it is the way that AJ manages his bullpen and the ideals that he's instilled in these guys that, look, I could call on you to pitch at any point. I think that's exciting for them. I think that there's kind of a closer by committee thing that they have there that they really like. And I think when you have a deep bullpen, which I believe this will be, that can only go 1-2 innings at a time, I think a really good pitching coach does a great job of masking whatever flaws they might have, instilling confidence in these guys, and just having them consistently throw strikes. I mean, it sounds weird to put it's this way because it's so simple, but the number one thing you can do is just get ahead in counts, throw strikes. At that point, it opens up the option for you to miss bats, for you to throw pitches out of the zone that guys are going to chase at. I think they've had a very specific philosophy, but it's not necessarily a philosophy that has been a one size fits all approach. And I think that's why you've seen power pitchers, sinker ballers, soft tossers, all kind of succeed coming out of this pen is because they have a different philosophy for each person.
And Chris, I know, real quick, I know on your pod too, Chris and company, you've been doing great with guests. I mean, you had Kirby Joseph on there. People can go check that interview out. You had Graham, which Graham's been, he's been streaming, and that's been a great thing to watch as well.
That's been something.
Yeah. He's definitely letting it loose there. But I want to ask you, Chris, just based on this kind of Lions offseason, obviously we talk a lot of Lions. Just the free agency period, what has it meant to you? I know there's been a portion of people that were disappointed with the fact that the Lions, specifically Brad Holmes, didn't go out and spend a lot of money. And then there's a section of fans, which I think we all kind of align with, which is, hey, they got their guys. They still upgraded, whether you like it or not. Where are you with kind of the free agency period as we head into the draft?
That's a good question. I am with the Lions right now in a place where I never thought I'd be, and a place that I haven't been with any Detroit team in a long time, which is I have full faith in the guy in charge. And so I'm going to trust his decision-making regardless of who they bring in. I think the fan base, because of how bad the Lions were for so long, is still kind of scarred by this idea that in the offseason, they need to add a lot. They don't need to add a lot. They were one possession away from the Super Bowl a year ago. So it's like, I think that they believe in the pieces they have right now. And ultimately, I think that the sign of a really good GM and a guy who knows what he's doing is not a guy who can just, draft the number one pick and have him develop. A lot of guys can take, would fall into a position like that. But I think back to last year's draft and the way that people ripped those first two picks. They didn't like the Laporta pick. They didn't like the Gibbs pick. Can you imagine where that team would have been without those guys on the roster last year? So to me, I think that him and Dan Campbell have such a good communication and back and forth with each other where they're aware of the players that Brad Holmes wants to bring into this organization, but they're also aware of the players that will work best under Dan Campbell's system. So like I'm going hands off and just saying, I understand maybe some frustration. People want the big spend, the big free agent signing that's going to blow everybody away. But this isn't baseball. In general, we maybe get one or two free agent signings every offseason cycle where we go, wow, that's a huge difference maker.
Right.
For the most part, it's about extending the guys you have, keeping guys you have, because there is a salary cap. It's not like baseball. You can just spend as much as you want. So I have, until proven otherwise, I have full faith in Brad Holmes because this is already a year ahead of schedule for me. The fact that in year 3 under this rebuild, the rebuild's done. I mean, they've built this thing to a legit contender. Until proven otherwise, I'm going to put my faith in whatever decisions Holmes is making because he's made very few mistakes thus far.
You're speaking my language over here, Chris. That's exactly
man.
What I try to preach. Yeah.
And it's exciting, man. The last time, really, to compare it to the Tigers, the last time I had a vibe like this with a GM in this city was Dombrowski. Dombrowski near the end made his mistakes, but for like a solid 10 years there, it was so much fun when you're like, oh shit, dude, we got Prince Fielder. Oh good, we traded for Miguel Cabrera. It's like, and a lot of those guys worked out. I'm getting that kind of vibe from Brad Holmes where it's like, I think that his eye test is as good as any eye test in football right now. So I'm putting my faith in him.
Do you think as well, I guess I might kind of know the answer to this question then, the Jared Goff situation. We've had this conversation on our show a lot, and I think a lot of Lions fans, they think it's an interesting thing because of the whole extension thing this offseason, and no one's seen it yet. Hendon Hooker getting drafted. Are you in on Jared Goff? And like I'll say it here, I'm all in on him, and I'm fine with the extension with him because I just want to win a Super Bowl, and it feels like you said, you're 10 minutes away from going to a Super Bowl with him already. Are you in on this whole Jared Goff thing? Or are you on like, hey, let's wait, let's see, let's maybe try and get a new franchise guy in? Where are you at with that?
No, what's that price point look like, Chris? What's that price point to you?
The price point, I don't know. The numbers side of things when it comes to NFL contracts, I'm not completely sure and I also know at some point here soon, I think Mahomes is going to get that massive extension. It's going to reshape the market, so I can't really put an exact number on it. But yes, I am in on Jared Goff. I've come to really like Jared Goff, and the thing is, we talk about quarterbacks in the NFL, and in general, I would say, with the exception of Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, and maybe one other here or there, it is every bit as much about the system as it is the player. Like I love Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady's the GOAT, right? I don't think Tom Brady would have had 7 Super Bowl rings if he was drafted by the Bengals. There is a level of luck that comes with this stuff. I like Jared Goff. Now you saw in that we'd say first year, but really the first half year that Goff was in Detroit, he didn't look great. He was timid in the pocket. He was checking down on pass plays. But what ultimately happened is they surrounded him with weapons that turned him back into the quarterback that we saw take a team to a Super Bowl in 2018. And I think that's really the key thing that Brad Holmes has done here is one, and this is the big one. They've given him an offensive line. They keep the guy upright. He doesn't get hit. I mean, Stafford, God bless him, took a beating when he was here. We've seen the opposite of that with Goff. And you give him St. Brown, and you give him some of these younger receivers, and you give him Laporta and Gibbs in this good running game. I absolutely believe that Jared Goff is in a system where he can be a Super Bowl quarterback. And if that's the case, I'm telling you, having seen this in other organizations, having seen it with the Lions, there's always the belief that the next Mahomes is right around the corner. Man, that's not always the case. Sometimes you move on from your previous quarterback and you end up with a guy who is a massive step backward, who might have a higher ceiling, but is going to have a much, much lower floor. I kind of feel that way with Goff. He's not super turnover prone. He's been very efficient, and they've given him a system that allows him to succeed. So to me, you got to make him the quarterback long-term right now.
Grass isn't always greener.
Exactly. 100%.
On the other side.
Yeah, Chris, you just got done talking about how you trust Brad Holmes, how you love Brad Holmes, and I think we all should. There's no reason that we shouldn't. But in watching him develop this team, has there been a player so far that you've enjoyed watching the most through their development, or do you think there's a player that you're really excited to watch next year that takes that next step? Kind of the same question I asked you with the Tigers earlier.
Yeah, well, I as a Michigan fan, Hutchinson falling to us at 2 is he's my favorite Michigan player of all time. I do think in the draft, one of the key things they need to do is just add a second pass rusher so that Hutch can avoid those consistent double teams that he was getting throughout the season. Because you saw the way he went nuts those last 3-4 weeks of the season going into the playoffs. I mean, he was a monster. So I think he's going to develop. But in terms of these young guys, I mean, I love Laporta. Laporta was so much fun last year. I mean, that is my dude. And I really think Brad Holmes, it was noticed half the league is made up of tight ends from Iowa at this point. And the fact that they consistently keep falling in the draft because that Iowa offensive scheme is so terrible that they're overlooked. Sam Laporta in 4 years at Iowa scored 5 touchdowns. And he had 5 touchdowns by the 7th game this year. It's like you have an elite talent that probably got overlooked because of the scheme. And he's maybe improvements need to be made in terms of the blocking situation, but as a pass catching tight end, we live in this golden age now. I'd say probably Tony Gonzalez started this of just this golden age of tight ends in football, going all the way through Antonio Gates and then Gronk and Travis Kelce. He is every bit a part of that, where he can not only be a great pass blocker for you, an intelligent football player, he can be one of your best receivers. So that's one of my favorite Lions or just Detroit draft picks in a long time. He is such a weapon for me.
Chris, before Chris spit with Laporta. I mean,
I love Laporta. Well, I got to get him on Chris and Company, man. So I love
you did that, Chris. Oh, you're breaking the algorithm in Detroit for a little bit.
We've broken ground with the Lions. We've had good luck with the Lions. So the next one we got to work our way up. Hopefully we can get Laporta soon.
Yeah, Chris, before we get you out of here, I do want to ask you, man, because again, with you in your content bag, I mean, you're crushing, number one. Obviously, we watch all your stuff, everything. I mean, now you're doing interviews with Lions players. You're back to your old bag here with the Tigers content. Yeah. You look a lot happier, man. Can you talk to the people just about what you've been up to? You're a free agent. You're crushing. How's it been?
You know, it's so funny, man. Like I'm not a guy who can hide emotions very well. So it was interesting to me how the first video I made after Barstool, people were like, wow, you already look better. And the thing is, that's not meant to be any knock toward the company I work for. I have a lot of love for Barstool and the people there, but to get closure in a situation was so helpful. And it's like, look, you have an opportunity here as a free agent to go back to doing, your bread and butter. And I liked blogging, but right now I don't have to blog. It's, what got you here? What got you here is the Tiger videos. It's the positive energy. It's being entertaining with these post-game videos. And now, I shout out to my guy, Austin, who's just been done an unbelievable job on the production side of things. We have a really funny vlog coming out tomorrow, recapping opening day at Comerica. So there's a creative freedom that I feel again. And ultimately look, man, especially at a place like Barstool, and this was to be expected. I knew this going back to college when I was following them. You're going to get backlash. You always do. There's going to be that toxicity. But what I've learned over these last several weeks, especially getting out to the ballpark and interacting with you guys, it's like, man, Detroit fans and Michigan-based fans, you guys have had my back from day one. And what you realize is the support is always going to be more overwhelming than the criticism. So like the freedom that I feel right now, and look, in a few months, if I'm still in this position, I might feel differently. But right now, like I'm watching my stuff and like, I see a different entity, and I think that's great. And I think it was a perfect kind of moment for Barstool to move on from me and for me to move on from Barstool. And I'm excited for the next opportunity. But for the time being, look, if you're ever going to be without a job, the perfect time to do it is when you're going into baseball season. And I had booked the Hinch interview already. So I kept that secret, being like, your first piece of content in like your new, your new chapter is like, that's your fastball, man. You got AJ
Hinch. Big one.
No, I was worried. He'd be like, oh, you don't work for Barstool anymore? Well, fuck you. I'll see you later. No, AJ was thankfully, he was super cool. He was so cool, man. So that was great. No, I'm when you get out of that bubble and get out of that cloud, you see just the overwhelming support and like Tiger fans, Lions fans, Michigan people, you guys always consistently have my back. So I'm happy to be doing a show like this and just getting out and seeing the people again. It's been a lot of fun, man, really.
Before, yeah,
kills it
Chris,
too, man.
You got our support, Chris. We relate to you, not quite on the same level, but to some extent with being a part of an organization or a prior workplace and doing something on your own. Like to see you, it inspires us. So it gets us fired up, man. So keep crushing. Before you go, we got two questions here from the chat. We want to throw up for you. Okay. First one, All Day Detroit Sports asks, what does Chris think about Chris Ilitch spending versus not spending? Oh, here Chris can go.
It's a big one.
Well, I mean, I'd prefer to spend to answer your question. No, the real talk, though, honestly, I think the idea of us ever spending the way that we spent when Mike Ilitch was the GM is not realistic. And I understand, in a way, I'm okay with that because by the end, and we love Dombrowski, but by the end, you got some pretty bloated deals. The Miggy contract was bloated. The Jordan Zimmerman signing was a disaster. So I'm okay with some, change in direction. What I'm not okay with is seeing an opportunity to put your team in position with a signing here or there that could potentially make you a team that's winning the division, that could win the pennant, that can make a deep run, and ignoring it. Like for instance, this year, JD Martinez is right there on the table for $12 million a year. And, you just kind of, you let him go to the Mets. I understand that the days of us being a team that is the biggest spender in baseball or one of the top three is not realistic. But I mean, you guys got to understand right now, they are in the bottom third of payroll. Like they are in that. The Royals have a higher payroll right now than the Tigers do at this point. This is the big problem I have with Chris Ilitch is he's gotten people to believe that Detroit is a small market. It's not. I've been here during times in which they spent on Prince Fielder and Miggy and Verlander. This is the idea of small market versus big market. Unless you're Oakland, is not a thing. Every one of these owners is a billionaire. The market is as big as you make it out to be. So I want spending, I do, but I also want responsible spending. I hope that as Chris Ilitch shows more trust in Scott Harris, which it seems like he's doing because we've already seen upgrades to the ballpark, upgrades to the facilities, upgrades to player development system, stuff like that. My hope is that the next step, that he shows more faith in how he's going to spend the money, and that will allow them to put together a team that's in that upper half in terms of payroll, that adds some players that can really contribute and help them win.
The final question here comes from Bon J. Mailbag. Are you mad the Tigers didn't draft Langford last year?
Okay, everyone's asking me that. And the thing is, this is a weird thing where in the moment, as somebody who had just gotten back from Omaha for the College World Series, and as somebody who expected them to draft Wyatt Langford, in the moment I said, I wish they would have drafted Langford. But this is one of those things where the fans reacted so harshly to the pick, where I kind of had to step in and be like, okay, look, would I have drafted Langford? Yes. But if Max Clark didn't go 3, he would have gone 4. He's one of the most decorated high school players, of a generation. So right now, yes, because I wish the offense was doing more, and I think Langford could help that. But, one thing that Chris Brown, shout out to him and Regalia do such a great job that he pointed out, when Wyatt Langford was Max Clark's age, he was, sitting on the dugout in Florida, like riding the bench. We got to put into perspective these guys' age. So, yeah, I think there is a lower floor. There always is with these high school guys. But right. I think what they saw was, look, Langford can be a really good hitter, and he'll continue to probably hit at the major league level. But with, you have that mystery box with somebody like Clark, who's, potentially the ceiling of him being a 5-tool player who's stealing bases, who's hitting for power. He said he tries to model his game. When I talked to him, he said his favorite player growing up was Bryce Harper. Like, if the idea of getting even an iota of what Bryce Harper has meant to the Nationals and the Phillies, like, it's very exciting. So right now in the short term, yes, but we got to understand that this is not like the NFL or even the NBA where you get quick returns on these people that you draft. You knew with a LeBron James when he was drafted by the Cavs, okay, this guy has it. Sometimes when it comes to player development, it takes 2-3 years before you know what you have. So it'll be kind of a grind here as we see Wyatt Langford contribute to what is a really good Rangers lineup. But I think to pass judgment at this point is silly. We got to wait to see what this guy develops into.
Yeah, well said. Chris, thank you so much, man. We got to do this again. We got to link up. We're trying to go to a Tigers game as a crew here.
For sure. I'll hit you guys up. Yeah, no, I go down for the series now, so I'll probably be there at some point in the next couple weeks. And yeah, hit me up, man.
Let's make it happen. There you go.
A crunch time Chris and Company vlog, like a
little crossover action. Yeah. Talk about breaking the algorithm, man. That would be the way to go.
There you have it. Chris Castellani, free agent, and he's crushing it. Chris and Company. Go check it out. Link in the description.